With Carlos Alcaraz out of action, that has chilled the Jannik Sinner rivalry. Sabalenka and Rybakina, that rivalry has cooled off. So now the biggest tennis rivalry is the top players against the four majors. What do the top players want? They want more money. When do they want it? They want it now. They basically want four things, though. They want a prize money increase. They want pension contributions. They want more say-so in how these events are run. And then the big stickler is they want some upside sharing. They want a percentage of gross revenue. So when tournaments increase in scale, the players will see in that upside. The tournaments have been pretty good about the wage increases. Wimbledon, 20% year-over-year raise in the prize money. U.S. Open is supposed to do something similar, which will put them over $100 million. As far as consultation and how tournaments are run, tournaments are all for that. We'd love to have player input, whether it's tennis balls or whether it's roof policy. We'd love player input. We would do that tomorrow. A little more grudgingly, but I think they're going to do it. The tournaments, I think the U.S. Open will probably be the first, will make contributions to pension plans, no problem. The big sticking point, though, is percentage of gross revenue and having some sort of tie-in. Wimbledon was very adamant. It makes no sense was how it was termed. Someone at the All England Club told me even more directly, listen, we've been running this tournament pretty well for more than 100 years. We're not going to change our business model because a couple of top players are upset. And it looks like the U.S. Open is sort of a non-starter there as well. The interesting news this week, though, is that the French Federation that runs the French Open, Roland Garros, they actually put out a proposal that did have a way that players could have some revenue sharing. And that puts pressure on these other events. One thing to know about this, Mike, is that these events, because of collusion, they can't confer with each other, right? I mean, it would make sense for everyone to sit in a room. That is not happening. Not only that, these events really can't even communicate with each other. So these are four separate negotiations that Larry Scott, who's representing the players, is having with each of the four majors. And it's interesting that Roland Garros, which kind of got things rolling, when you'll recall, they did have a prize money increase, but it actually was a lower percent of revenue year over year. That was a huge misread of the room. That was a big problem. In a lot of ways, that was what sort of amplified all of these negotiations and media protests, and sort of that raised the temperature. So it is a bit ironic that now the French Federation has made this concession on revenue. But I was told by someone who has seen broad strokes of the agreement, I was made privy to those, it's not quite, I don't want to say Trojan horse, our Odyssey theme this summer. I don't know if it was quite that, but I don't think this is quite the bonanza that it appears on paper.
Is it a step in the right direction? Because even Craig Tiley's been kind of doing a mini press tour, kind of talking about maybe a fixed revenue model with the USTA and the US Open. I think everyone's kind of signaling different versions, and it's interesting to hear you say they can't really talk to each other, but they can go do interviews and put their thoughts out to the media about what they're kind of all thinking, and that's not collusion, it's just a report. So, I mean, it's what is the basis of what you saw, and how is it a little bit of a Trojan horse in comparison to just a straight fixed model deal and or a gross revenue deal?
It is all about the accounting, and it is all about how these balance sheets are going to be laid out and what counts and what doesn't. And, we talk about profit versus revenue, but even revenue, two people can read the same balance sheet very differently. So are things like the marketing budget and capital improvements and all sorts of the other expenses that tournaments have, does that count as revenue? It's interesting to note. I think, honestly, I think a motivation, what's galvanized a lot of this is the Wimbledon expansion, which in theory could realistically make Wimbledon, a $1 billion plus annual event. And when Wimbledon expands to the other side of the street and converts the golf course, its finances change dramatically. The U.S. Open, as anyone who's tried to buy tickets in 2026 knows, some of these the capital improvements as they were built are really about having much more expensive club seating. Roland Garros, I'm not sure, has that financial upside. But again, they made a bold step with this proposal. Remember, Roland Garros essentially met with this group of Larry Scott during the French Open. They met with him after. They said, listen, give us some time. We'll come back with a counterproposal. To their credit, they did. And to their credit, their counterproposal did have this revenue sharing model. But I was told sort of be careful what you wish for, because this is not as simple as, hey, listen, we made $400 million and you want 8% of that, here's $32 million. It's a lot more complicated than that. It's really going to depend a lot more about the accounting, what is counted as a write-off, what is a charge. It's not quite as simple as it is being portrayed. Nevertheless, it's a good headline for the French Federation. It puts even more pressure on the other three majors because we needed more tennis drama in all of this.
I know.
Craig Tiley earned the wrath of. You want to go there? Or you want to go somewhere else?
I'm kind of curious about what you were going to say because that's a great. I can't leave you hanging. He earned the wrath of how so?
Well, Craig Tiley earlier this year earned the wrath of the other three majors by making this agreement with the PTPA because we needed another group. The PTPA, of course, has nothing to do with this Larry Scott group, but this was a different players' advocacy group. Craig Tiley, much to the dismay of the other three majors, made in theory, it was a whole lot of nothing. I mean, no money changed hands. It was basically, leave us alone, don't create a fuss, and you can look at our books. And then Craig Tiley then subsequently decamps to the USTA. Interesting dynamics there. Yeah, all of which is to say.
Well, I want to ask you about that because I think it's interesting how this news came down, right? And I was curious as to why they released this information and/or making this announcement now. But it obviously is, partially pressure on Craig Tiley's USTA and the U.S. Open, but also it comes on the heels of hearing reports that they're contemplating boycotting. These players are contemplating boycotting the mixed doubles, which the U.S. Open rolled out last year. It's only a year old. I think it was a wild success. What more are you hearing about that? It seems that they kind of were released in concert.
Yeah, and I think. If you want to be non-cynical, the French Federation was given time to make this counterproposal. They didn't want to do it during Wimbledon. Here we are after Wimbledon. The French Federation presents their counterproposal that includes this revenue sharing. As you say, it is very hard to detach this from the fact that the U.S. Open is next. The U.S. Open has yet to announce their purse and prize money and anything else in conjunction with the 2026 U.S. Open. That will happen shortly. I'm told the U.S. Open and the USTA, they're already committed to about what Wimbledon did, 20%. They're okay with some pension contributions. Again, all four majors, I think, are more than happy to have this player input. The U.S. Open, the USTA, they are not going to agree readily to any sort of revenue sharing model. And yeah, the question is always with these things is how much leverage do the players have? And there have been rumblings about mixed doubles. What I was told is that there are players who are happy to play, who are sort of on a wait list, who haven't been tapped yet. But if, Jannik Sinner is a name that's been thrown around, Arina Sabalenka has been very vocal. If those players choose not to play in the mixed event as a form of protest, they'll still be okay to fill the field. Obviously, you'd rather have the two current world number ones than not. But I don't think it's fatal to this mixed doubles event. Remember, too, Serena Williams will be in the draw. I have a feeling the served, the served masthead could play, and if Serena Williams were part of the field, they'd remember Novak Djokovic too has kind of distanced himself from this group. So if you had Serena Williams, Novak Djokovic, and all of my downstairs neighbors, I suspect you'd still be okay. But no, I mean, like any negotiation, leverage is part of this. And one thing I think we talked about this at Wimbledon. The players, the media protest. It is what it is. I don't know. It's more of an annoyance than anything else. The tournaments would rather have better publicity, but it's not fatal. What the tournament discovered was that the threat of turning off comp tickets could be very effective in affecting behavior. That did not go over well with the players and their agents. So that's a lever that the tournaments discovered they had. I mean, I think honestly, if we back up, I think all this is healthy. I think this is labor negotiations. In a perfect world, there's a union, there's management, they sit out at the table, they hammer it out. Tennis does not work that way. You've got these four separate entities, these four majors that have to negotiate individually. They will reach different conclusions. What works in Paris might not work at Wimbledon or in New York. I do think the players are ultimately going to come out of this ahead, but I also think that I don't know if especially Wimbledon and the U.S. Open are inclined to completely adjust their business model to accommodate Jannik Sinner's threat not to play mixed doubles.
I tell you what, the players might not deserve 22% of a strawberry plushie, but I think they probably should get 100% of those giant balls that are floating around that they all signed. Just start there. Give them 100% of that revenue. That the only reason why the kids buy them is to get the players' signatures, and let's just start cutting into the fat from there. It's a good idea.
You say that jokingly, but the player, honestly though, the players see things like that. They see the honey-deuce revenues. they see what these television contracts are worth, and they say, everybody oohs and ahs when the winner gets a $5 million check on the last weekend. But if you frame this as a function of gross revenue, and you say, well, wait a second, like what ESPN pays alone, before we've sold a single ticket, before we've sold a single suite, before we've done any hospitality, before anyone's touched their honeydews, when ESPN's contract alone more than covers the prize money, we're not getting our fair share. So those tennis balls added, honestly, added to the gross revenue pile. Yeah. And I understand the player's point of view. I also think the players need to recognize their leverage here. But here's something else. The very top players, they're not going to miss this event, right? All their endorsement time. I mean, Hugo Boss is not playing Taylor Fritz so he can play a quarterfinal in Madrid. They're paying him so he'll play a middle weekend at the U.S. Open with Taylor Swift watching, and he's on national TV. The top players, as much because of the endorsement contracts as anything else, but also that they play for majors, $5 million to the winner. They are all sorts of their bonuses, their apparel bonuses. The players are very unlikely to miss these majors. And then the other players, just strictly for the prize money, you lose in the first round of all four majors, you'll make close to $500,000. If you're ranked number 50 and you can win a round and lose your next round in New York and leave town with almost $200,000, you're not going to be really eager to miss that as well. Mm-hmm. So I think that the threat of boycott is pretty minimal. So I think the players need to accept that, agitate for change. I think we all agree they probably should be making more money, but you got to be realistic about what your leverage is. Yeah. Well, thanks, JW. I appreciate the insight, and we're on to set number 2. On we go.